Hi, guys, and welcome to this Intuitive Eating expansion Pure Pod. So it's a Thursday. I apologize. Happy New Year. I made an error in my schedule. So I have a meeting booked tomorrow on Friday. So I offered to run the pod today. Unfortunately, I think that means that many of you can't join me live. So you've asked me to send the replay, which I'm so happy to do. So I'm going to treat this more like a training. And if anyone hops in, then they'll come in and I'll answer any questions. So the role of these weekly group coaching calls is really to give you guys the information that you need, right? There's always information I'm putting out on my blog, on my podcast, and on IG, everywhere I go, I'm just focused on intuitive eating. So the goal of these individual coaching pods is to give you the support that you need, answer any questions that you have, and we can kind of shift direction as we need to. So if somebody comes in, they have a specific question, then we'll focus on that. If people aren't able to attend, hearing somebody else's answer to your question is often going to be super helpful. Myself, I'm in a mastermind right now, and I don't just go on and listen to the answer that my coach gives me for my question, because you get ideas and other people in the group will ask questions that you didn't even know that you needed to ask, but it's going to push you forward. So that's really the goal of the group. So Fridays, we'll get back to Fridays. We'll run 3 Fridays of the month, take a day off or a week off every month. So don't worry, I'm going back to Fridays. Again, my sincere apologies for my mix up. I'm managing 3 schedules, potentially 5 schedules. So I just have to make sure I get everything in the right place, or meetings and stuff get booked in. So that being said, Happy New Year. I thought, the best way to start the new year, because there's all this diet culture, right? Everywhere we look, it's diet culture coming at us. The best way to start might be to go back to the beginning of intuitive eating and really think about, how does my body feel, right? When we think about diet culture and when we look at the studies, we know as soon as we put a food like as off limits, or I like to think about it like on a pedestal, then that food becomes even more enticing to us. And some super cool research around that I was looking at in Health at Every Size. If you haven't read this book, I absolutely recommend. I'm actually going to present on this topic to the practitioners in one of the clinics where I work, because they're always referring people for weight loss, They have an obesity program, they have guidelines. They've asked me to come back in when the obesity program is being developed. It was right around the time that I went off of work. So I didn't get to give my feedback, but my first response to the idea of an obesity program was that all of the providers in the clinic needed to check their weight bias. Because when we look at the research, and Health at Every Size gives us all that research, body weight is not a health indicator. Body weight does not tell us what the health outcome is going to be. I have clients living in larger bodies whose blood work is 100 times better than clients living in normal, whatever that is, low body weight bodies. So we can't look at someone and guarantee that we know what their health outcome is going to be based on their weight. That being said, intuitive eating is like taking weight loss off the table and focus on getting back to our body. And the studies clearly show, since the intuitive eating framework was developed back in the 90s, people that are intuitive eaters are happier, they have more confidence, they have more calm around meal times, they have better body image. Our bodies are amazing. So that's what I want you guys to start this year with. I want you to start the year with thinking about one thing that you love about your body. Oh, I have someone coming in. I'm just going to pause for a minute. Hi. So I'm just kind of leading a training because 3 of the other people weren't able to attend today because it's not the Friday. So I'll just continue with that, and you're welcome to let me know if you have any questions. But what I was talking about was how intuitive eaters, part of the process is learning to love our bodies. So that can be an important part in kind of pushing back against the diet culture that's getting thrown at us at this time of year. And what that could mean is standing in front of the mirror and just expressing love to one part of your body every day. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to get to like, gee, I really love, you know, the the extra flap or whatever on my arm. It could be like, oh, I have a great smile. But it's giving that feedback to our body that our bodies are amazing, right? For anyone that's had children, like we grew little tiny beings. As frustrating as they sometimes are on this side of that equation, like the body is amazing and it supports us through stress. It supports us to move. So I want you to focus sometime in the next week, sometime every day, on what your body does for you, right? So it's so easy when things aren't feeling great to focus on that. So for example, my back was really, yeah, you're just going to listen. That's great. That's why I'm just doing the training, because people weren't able to come. But for example, my back was really bothering me a bit before the Christmas holidays, and I could have let that be like, oh, I shouldn't go cross country skiing today. I shouldn't get outside and move because that's probably going to hurt my back. But I didn't let it stop me. And I did the movement in the way that felt good. And the feedback that my body gave me was quite immediate and quite amazing. Like the next day, my back hurt far less. I mean, there's so many things that are going to impact how our body feels, right? My back hurting, it doesn't mean that it's just that I slept wrong or I twisted wrong. For me, it means there's some pelvic floor issue happening, and I usually need to do some release work for that, because the body's all connected, right? It also is a reminder that I should go back to my physio and get my hips and everything stacked, because my hips are not stacked in the proper place often. And that's realignment that I know needs to happen. And an osteopath, or my physio functions kind of like an osteopath, they'll just put me back into the alignment. And I can tell right away the next day that my body is working better because I've got that alignment back. So I want you to focus on what is going well with your body, how your body has supported you over the years. It's easy when there's injury or when we don't feel great to focus on that, right? So, and that comes back to some of the key things that need to be on board for us to be able to even have that attunement with our body that intuitive eating is, right? Intuitive eating means we have that interoception to see what's happening, and we're in tune with that, and we don't let outside things interfere with our relationship with our body as much. So things that can affect our ability to actually really recognize what's happening, like hunger wise, satiety wise, how our body's feeling, energy wise. Like if sleep is not great, and that comes back to self-care, if sleep is not great, everything else is going to kind of fall apart. So I just was working with a client today where, her main focus was going to have weight loss surgery to reduce her weight. Fair. I shared with her the results from another client who's around the same age, who had gone through the Ottawa Hospital program, had lost 100 pounds, and then it has since started to regain the weight. They usually keep it off for maybe a year, maybe a bit longer, depending on what's happening. But the body is smart. And that's what the Health at Every Size book tells us, how smart the body is. And the body often leads to that weight gain because it's feeling like it's under stress. So if we can deal with these outside factors and fuel the body consistently, but actually listen to what the body's asking, that's where we can get to a place where we're intuitively eating. And I would argue if you're focused on intuitive eating, you're actually living more intuitively, which is so much more enjoyable as well. At some point in the future, my goal is to do like an intuitive living summit where you see a lot of different practitioners that work with people that all focus around, having that mindfulness, that awareness, in our body, but also living intuitively, like knowing that we can pause during the day. At any point during the day, we can pause and kind of reset, right? So if our stress level is high, that's one of the other things. If sleep is off, if stress is off, those are things that are going to influence that body's ability to support you the best way it can, but also they'll make us hang on to weight. They'll make us not be able to recognize when we're hungry and when we're not. So when we're in stress, the body's response is often to hang on to weight. Not for everyone, but for most people. Biologically, the body wants to support us. So it's going to try to hang on to energy, and we're not going to feel hungry because all the energy that we need is stuck out here because it's trying to really like fight that lion and tiger, whatever that stress is. So I invite you for the beginning of this year to come back to that interoceptiveness and check in to see what's happening. So that can mean a few different things. That can mean you go and grab my healthy habits or my healthy habits tracker on the website, and you just start to focus on the things that you're doing well. That is a process in intuitive eating where we're focusing on what we're doing. So many people, and I think pre-COVID, maybe it was worse, COVID kind of gave us that space to actually notice what was going on if we chose to. But so many of us kind of live in an automatic pilot, right? We don't really know what's going on. We don't really know what we're eating or how that feels. So if we can bring it back to some core healthy habits and start to focus on it that way, that can be a way to get back into or start our journey with intuitive eating. So my healthy habits tracker, we focus on sleep. So 7 to 9 hours of sleep is ideal for most people. I've recently saw some research where it said for females, 8 to 9 hours. So sleep is super important. Sleep lets our body reset. It reduces that stress response in the body. And, it lets the body do all its repair and stuff that needs to happen while we're sleeping. So sleep would be number one. So the client I was working with today, that's where we went. She's not sleeping, maybe 4, maybe 5 hours sometimes. And then she's trying to go to work and stand all day at work. So that's not going to support her body. And she's also not fueling herself. So sleep is like number one. So if you need help with sleep, there's a blog post, my 5 tips for getting your best sleep on my website as well. And in that, I walk through like having a routine to go to bed, having some supplements that might support you. So magnesium could be a supplement that would support your body. It relaxes the body. So you can get a magnesium, in a tablet form. I have a powder that's like a berry flavored powder that I put in my water. If I remember, I haven't been great at remembering, but I start to drink it around supper time until I go to bed as a way to give the body that calm response. Magnesium is calming. It also has good benefits. The client I was working with today is constipated because they're not sleeping, because they're not eating, because they're not getting their fluid. But adding that magnesium in as a way to support the sleep can help with some of those other situations in the body as well. So sleep is one thing you can track with that tracker. Water intake is another. So when we drink water, it's not flushing out blood sugar, it's not flushing out fat, but the body uses water for so many processes. And it also is letting the body know that it doesn't have to be stuck in stress. So if we're dehydrated, that increases the cortisol and the stress hormones in the body. So adequate hydration is an important part of being an intuitive eater. And that might be a good place to go to when you're seeing all this diet culture thrown at you. Just start to focus on some of these things that can support your body. So for hydration, the average female, it's about 2.5 to 2.7 liters of fluid a day. It can be water, it can be sparkling water, it can be coffee, tea, like everything's going to count as fluid intake. But that's kind of the target to get to. If we don't have enough fluid and we're constipated, that makes it worse. If we don't have enough fluid and we add fiber to help with constipation, it will still not be working right unless we've got that fluid on board. So sleep, fluid, and an easy way, if you have elastic bands, sometimes I'll have clients put an elastic band around their water bottle. Then every time, so if it's like 500 mLs, client I was working with today, that's what hers was, then she could put like 4 on her water bottle to try to get to at least 2 liters, which is above what she's taking. Every time she finishes a bottle, she moves an elastic onto her wrist. So that's just a visual way. Sometimes because we have so many things that are taking our attention, sometimes just remembering how much water we drank can feel like a mountain that we don't need to climb. We can take out some of that mental work with that as well. So you can track sleep, you can look at hydration, you can just start to be more consistent with supplement intake. In North America, we cannot get enough vitamin D. We're too far from the equator. The only food sources are fatty fish and dairy products. And the majority of people in Ontario, when we check, 90% of us are deficient. Unfortunately, OHIP stopped covering vitamin D lab tests probably 15 years ago now. But when we do check people, 90% in Ontario are deficient. If there's any pigmentation to the skin, you're going to be even at a higher risk for that. So for vitamin D, adults, 2,000 international units a day year round, if it's at a normal state. If you're deficient, you're going to need to go above that to get those levels up. It's kind of a back and forth that I have with one of the nurse practitioners that I work with. We have to give a higher amount to get our stores back up. So, but start out with 2,000. If you don't know what your level is, you can always ask your doctor to check it. It's a $30 or $35 fee at the lab to get it checked. I work in a naturopathic clinic as well, and they're checking more consistently and titrating those levels up, and we see better outcomes. I mean, vitamin D is important for energy, cancer, heart health, bone health. Obviously, we've known that for years. And the other thing we see improvement with is mood, like anxiety and depression definitely are improved with vitamin D, and immunity is improved with vitamin D. So across the board, I feel everyone in Ontario should take vitamin D. I have my kids taking it. You know, I used to go in the school that said, like, you know, once you heat gummies, you're actually killing some of the nutrients in the gummies, like, you know, the multivitamin gummies and things. But if that's a way to get your kids to take it, then they're still going to get more than getting none if they won't take a drop or a capsule. So that's another way to look at that. So when we look at those healthy habits that can get us back into intuitive eating, it's again, starting with that self-awareness, right? Like, how much water did I drink? How much sleep did I get? Another big thing that can affect how we can feel our hunger cues and even know what's happening is stress. So, you know, a lot of people will find the holiday season more stressful because we're maybe going back into familiar roles that we have when we're with family. Maybe we're traveling, maybe the weather, you know, lots of different factors can add that stress. If the sleep is off because we're not at home. So there's so many different things that can impact stress. So that's why I would focus on doing some kind of stress reduction strategy every day. Again, there's supplements that we can take for stress. L-theanine is one. It comes in like a chewable often that you can just kind of use to support yourself. Rescue Remedy by Bach. Flower Remedies is another one. That's a homeopathic one. You can just add it in water. Website about that too. Anywhere where we can take a moment in the day to say to our body, it's safe. You don't have to be stuck in stress. So that could also be as simple as doing a box breath every time you go to the bathroom or every time you come back and sit down at your computer. So a box breath, for those of you who don't know, I'll demonstrate. It's going to be in through the nose for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4 to 5, out through the mouth for a count of 4 to 5. So I'll demonstrate one, and then I'll talk about it a little bit. So we're going to go. Okay, so there's 2. Even after 2, I can already feel my shoulders are like, oh, hi, we don't have to be stuck up there. I used to do it in one of the lifestyle programs that I ran at the university. And I had some of my colleagues say to me, oh, I saw your video last night. I'd be in like the parking lot at the grocery store after class or whatever. And they would say, oh, I did that when I was in bed and I fell asleep halfway through, because I would try to get people to do 10 deep, like 10 box breaths. So the benefit of that is every chance we can get in the day to say to our body, whew, let's reduce the stress response. We are safe. And by doing that with deep breathing, that changes the hormonal response in the body to reduce the cortisol response. Doing it by taking a supplement, having that Bach flower remedy in your water. There's lots of different ways that we can choose to support the body. We can, take a bath if we can in the day to reduce our stress. Yesterday, I caught myself trying to push through and have far more screen time than my head would like. So I just go in my room, dark room, and I just sit there for a few minutes. I might read a book, or I might just actually sit there and breathe. But those little pockets of time, those are ways to support our body and reduce that stress response. When the body's in stress, it doesn't know what else to do other than to hang on tight. And that means all the energy is here and we can't feel that hunger and fullness. That can mean like, often I'll have clients that will say, I'm not hungry all day. But then when I get to the evening, whoa, like I could eat the house. That is the stress response too, right? Because you're stuck. You're kind of like type A, really on the go, go, go. And that's just a reminder from the body. Yeah, if you fuel me more, we're going to feel better. Because then that awareness comes down to, oh, I didn't eat all day. I overate at supper because I was like, oh, I need to get all this food in. My body is hungry. But then later on, we're not feeling well, right? We feel uncomfortably full. We don't feel energetic because our body's going to digest that food. So there's all these little pieces, but I just want you to pick one thing to focus on to get you started back into the intuitive eating journey or continue on it. Because remember, when we look at intuitive eating, there is the 3 P's of intuitive eating, right? So that is practice, patience, and paying attention. So if you even just start with paying attention, then you're already like on your way, right? It's just so many of us, and that's where the intuitive living comes in too. I've been working with a coach in the Courage Practice is the name of the company since 2020, end of 2019. And a lot of the work that we do is really putting the focus, helping me refocus on what my body is saying to me and refocus on what I already inherently know, but I'm not always listening to, right? Like that intuition or those ideas and those things that we already kind of know, but it's sometimes hard with all this other stuff on top to really sit with it. So that's where taking a few minutes every day and just sitting with ourselves can be a big part of the process as well. But we're not going to be, if you're new to intuitive eating or you've been doing it for a year or two, we're not going to ever be perfect at intuitive eating. It's not a destination. It's a journey, right? So we're going to pay attention, we're going to have patience, and we're going to practice. So I was speaking a bit about emotional eating in the podcast. I think I put that one out yesterday, and the strategy of distraction, which we use in the Craving Change program. So as an intuitive eating coach, it's kind of like, oh, emotional eating is not wrong. So should we be teaching people distraction? But sometimes there's so much happening that we need to just take a break, right? So we need to just shift our attention, and that can help relax the body, right? If you just focus on something, you can't get it done. Sometimes we can go away and do something else. So I was trying to piece together a quilt that I found in my mom's things. And I thought, oh, I've got this. It's a challenging thing for me to put together, but I figured out how I thought the pieces would fit. I sewed it, and then I basically made a bunch of little pointy pillow ends versus getting the 2 pieces together. In that moment, I was like, oh, you just need to walk away. So the same thing with thinking about food and thinking about, oh, am I hungry? Am I not hungry? Sometimes we have to take a step back and just do something else to distract us, right? Especially if it's emotional eating. Emotional eating is inherently not wrong, right? That emotional eating has served us. Over the years, it has served us for some reason. So it's given us comfort. It's given us distraction. It's soothed us. So for you to go back to eating some of those foods is perfectly normal, and eating in a way that maybe feels problematic, but it doesn't have to be wrong. So when I run the Craving Change program, which is kind of married into this program now, what we talk about for emotional eating is it's when it feels problematic for you that I would start to call it emotional eating. So for you, it might be what you're eating feels really like off the rails, maybe just the quantity that you're eating. And some of it can be when you're eating, like if you're eating in secret. There's lots of different ways it can show up, but it's not wrong. So sometimes, if we're trying to get back into things or refocus, sometimes you're going to need to use the distraction technique and just give yourself a break. That could be doing a different activity. That could be, focusing on a crossword. That could be reading a book. So don't be afraid to sometimes say like, okay, today I'm not going to really focus on, I don't have the energy to check in with my body and see how it feels. And in that same place, that might take us into more kind of mechanical eating. So I worked with a client this morning as well, who, came to me with a referral of disordered eating or an eating disorder. And they just want help getting back to a consistent food intake, but it's going to have to be more mechanical because of the stress that they're under kind of on a consistent basis. So what that means in intuitive eating, that's that gentle nutrition piece. If you've worked with me, you'll know that I talk about trying to put together a protein, a fat, and a carbohydrate at every meal and snack. So that can be a place where you start, and that can be where you reach out to me and you say, hey, Kathy, you said you had a menu for that. I know intuitive eating, I'm supposed to listen to my body, but I really just need something to take out that mental work right now. Can I just look at that and use that as a resource? And quite often, quite often, all the time when people ask me for that support, I'm happy to give it to them with the understanding that I still want you to be focused on how your body's feeling, but that can sometimes be an easy way just to get some structure, to see that if we're eating more balanced and consistently, we'll get more energy too. And then that circles back to a long time ago when I was talking about putting that food on the pedestal. So in the gentle nutrition, you're going to focus to get the protein, carbohydrate, and fat piece. It also doesn't mean that we're taking foods off the table. So when we become intuitive eaters, we see food as food, right? You can think about it as fuel or energy, but we try to take away that label of good or bad because food has no moral value. Food is food. And food does lots of things for us, right? It lets us celebrate. We connect around food. We have memories with food, growing up. There's so much about food that's why diets kind of wreck our relationship with food because they put restrictions on it. So as intuitive eaters, we want to take those foods that we feel are up here on the pedestal and they're restricted, and we want to bring them into that normal eating cycle. And if you follow lots of people online around intuitive eating, that doesn't mean that like you're going to eat all the foods that were previously on your off limits list, because that won't work, right? You'll just eat them and you'll feel horrible, and that won't work. But the interesting thing, when you look at some of the research that they've done and some of the research that's cited in this Health at Every Size, as soon as we make a food off limit, even if we haven't told anyone, as soon as our brain says, okay, I'm going to eat healthier and I'm not going to eat chips for the entire month. I'm going to do no chips for the month. Okay, so as soon as we do that, our brain, that hunger response, so there's a heightened taste response that happens. So if we've labeled a food off limits, when we taste the food, we'll get like a taste response that goes up to the brain and does some happy chemical release and makes us feel good. So that's why eating things like cakes or or potato chips and sweet things and stuff will give us like that feedback for that taste. As soon as we say food's off limits, that response is heightened. So even before we've eaten that food, that response is heightened. So that is why if you say like, I'm never going to eat chips or I'm not going to eat cookies, and then a cookie presents itself and you say, okay, I'm going to have one. I can only have one. That's all, I'm already breaking my eating plan. I can only have one. That is why it's so hard to stop when you get to one, because that taste response is happening. Their satisfaction response. I can't remember what exactly titled. So I hope this is making sense. If it isn't, let me know. But it's also heightened. So you have that one cookie, and previously, if that cookie is kind of in your schedule or in your allowed, like if it's just part of life, cookies come, cookies taste good. My kids eat cookies. Then when you have that cookie, you're going to think, oh, that was really satisfying. That tasted good. But you're probably not going to have that response where it's like, oh my gosh, that cookie tasted so good. I shouldn't have eaten it. Oh, I don't know when I'm going to have cookies again. And there's more. Oh, there's only 3 left. So maybe I'll just eat all the 3 cookies because I shouldn't be eating them. So there's some of that mental game that's at play, but it's also because it's doing that happy response in the brain, and that's heightened. So it tastes even more like you want more of it. So that's why we want to get food to that neutral place. And then we're not going to be in that struggle all the time. But the first part of that is starting to pay attention to how our body's feeling and using that as feedback. So in that example, if I went crazy and ate all the cookies, guaranteed, if I had self-awareness the next day, I'm not going to feel that great. Like my joints might hurt with a higher sugar intake. My stomach might be upset. I might feel bloated or constipated. There's so many outcomes that can come from eating foods that don't, have a good nutrient density, but just also from overeating things. Even overeating good things can lead to that too, right? That's why we want to focus on getting back to those messages that our body's sharing with us, but we don't have to do it every day. It's kind of like when I work with people with diabetes, it's a chronic condition. So every day it's there. They've got to think about it every day. Some days you need a break and not to worry about it, right? So the same thing when we're practicing intuitive eating is taking away some of that push and pull that comes with putting foods up on that pedestal. What else? So when we think back to the healthy habits tracker, there's stress, there's supplements. I already talked about the vitamin D. Some people take omega-3 depending on other health risks. There's lots of other supplements. On the sleep blog post, I talk about magnesium, melatonin mixed with L-theanine and 5-HTP, because that combination gives you more restful sleep, even if the sleep isn't as long, and it helps you get to sleep. So that could be a switch some people make. One of the clients I worked with this morning, that's where sometimes she'll take melatonin when she feels really like she can't sleep or she has to go to work. I don't think we should leave supplements that can support our body to be like a last resort, right? I know a lot of people think about medication like that. Like, I'm only going to take that when I really need it. But if we're not sleeping, or if we're in pain, if someone refuses, to take a pain medication until they're really in pain, that's not the point. It's not really supporting the body. If we're able to consistently give the body that support, then everything else is going to feel easier, right? So for that client, I was saying, try this combination, try to be a bit more consistent, because if we don't sleep, it's like the whole world is falling apart, right? So I have a child right now who's having extreme separation anxiety. It's a new thing. It's heartbreaking to have like half an hour, 60-minute video calls and they're just crying the whole time. So I was talking with my sister, who's a art therapist and works with kids with behavioral problems in her role with the school board she works at. And we were talking about like, okay, maybe we need to help her move some of the emotions. So I got ready, we got on a call, she was blubbering. And so I said, oh, let's dance together. So I picked one of our favorite songs off of a high vibe playlist that I have at home with the kids sometimes. And I danced but she just couldn't get like into that place. She tried to dance a bit, and then she just kept crying. Fast forward to the next day or 2 days later, after she had had 2 nights of sleep supported with a bit of the melatonin L-theanine 5-HTP combination. It's obviously at a lower dose for kids. It was like night and day. She was like a brand new kid. She'd also had some activity that day, which she really needs to be active every day. But it was like I was talking to a different person. So, and I see that in my own experience with sleep. Didn't have a great night of sleep last night. I don't know what was happening. But when I don't have a great night of sleep, it impacts that next day, right? It makes everything feel like that much worse. So with a lot of my clients, and maybe oddly to my colleagues, they don't always get why I'm focused. Why am I talking to people about sleep when my role is dietitian? But if sleep is not on point, nothing else can be on point. So sleep, sleep, sleep. So use the healthy habit tracker. You can check sleep, you can check water intake, you can check supplements, you can do stress, reduction strategies, give yourself a check mark. The reason I created like a document that people can print off is because we know if we're visual people, if we have like, I don't have a calendar close by, but if you have something where you can check it, it's kind of like giving yourself a gold star every day. That actually has an effect on the motivation and the empowerment that we feel for making those choices. So then we can keep going. So that's where sometimes having that visual can help. Another thing, when we think about visual, there's an author called Mel Robbins. She wrote the 5-second rule, I think, like years ago. And that was, when there's something that you don't want to do and you're feeling resistance, if you just say like, I'm going to do it, and you count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and do it, then it's done. It's usually doesn't take as much time, or it's not as painful as we think it's going to be, right? During the pandemic, she was noticing like her mental health was declining a bit, as a lot of us experienced. She started to do something where she high-fived herself. So now she has a new book out called The High Five Habit. I've had lots of clients read it on my recommendation. And it's, again, that feedback. So if you think about high five, when you high five someone, what are the feelings or the emotions that come with high five? So high five, like often you're celebrating, like at a sports event, or, like it's a celebration, right? So what she started to do when she noticed that, she was kind of having a harder time getting up and dragging through the day, she started to high five herself every morning in the mirror. And then she created this whole movement of people high-fiving, and they were posting on across social media. But then when she dug deep into it, there's reasons with how the brain works with, that positive feeling or that positive energy to start the day. And that also plays down to gratitude. I don't have it here, but I had a really great friend from Australia mail me an amazing gratitude journal. There's lots of research to show us that when we focus on gratitude and focus on the positive things, not like we can talk ourselves out of things by just being positive. So I had that discussion with my ex this week around my daughter, because she was relaying to me that he was telling her to just stop missing mommy so much and look at all the fun that we're having. That's one way to approach it, but that doesn't change how the mind is working, right? It's that repetitive focus on the good things that can change how the mind is working. And amazingly enough, he experiences anxiety disorder himself, so he was able to walk her through some of the tools that they've given him as part of his support, and how does it feel and where is it, and that's some of the work I do with my intuitive coach, and it's really having that body awareness too. But that being said, the gratitude piece is key. So that's another part in the healthy habits tracker, is just to write down a couple of things that you have gratitude for. So I think the book The Secret talked about that, but I think there was a book that came off of that book. I can't remember what it was called. It was something about 28 days, because I was in a challenge a few years ago, and it was all about focusing on gratitude every day. There was a repetitive, like, thank you, thank you, thank you, that was part of the process. But when we focus on the things that are going well, there is some evidence to show that more things start to go well. And it also makes it so much easier to get through the day, right? Versus just being focused on negative things. When you look at some books like The Body Keeps the Score and some of Gabor Mate's work, our bodies are amazing, but our bodies also store lots of stuff, right? So there's, different diseases that are linked to the stress response in the body. And there's a lot of benefit of really having awareness about what we put in our mind as a way to support our mind. So what else was in my healthy habit tracker? Activity. So the one thing we could focus on to start our year from that intuitive place is maybe intuitive eating feels like this big umbrella and it's like way out there right now. And how could I even get to that? Then just focus on moving our body and how does my body feel, right? So that could be just going for a walk. I've just been doing some 30-minute walks between my calls this week as a way to keep moving. I've got my running shoes on in the house. I've got that back pain hasn't completely resolved. I need to go back to physio, but it's also me knowing that if I move, like when I cross country skied that one day, the next day I felt a lot better. And then that got me out cross country skiing again. But even as a healthcare practitioner and someone that knows the benefit of exercise, I'm not going to lie, it's not easy to get out there. You'll see if you follow my podcast on Monday, it's coming out. I did a whole podcast on mindset, the mindset around getting out on the ski hill and getting out to cross country ski, and all of the mindset, like reframing that I had to do just to do those activities last year and this year as well. And the way that the mind wants to keep us safe, right? So that's where if we've been in this cycle of dieting or following restrictive programs, I've had clients describe that like guardrails before. That feels safe. That feels like I just need these guardrails in place, or I just need my weight to stay below this number and then it's okay. Even if medically they're going to be told they're still overweight, they've reduced their weight, they get to a certain number, and then, oh, if I go over that number, then I know I've got to get back on things and really tighten up those guardrails. But as intuitive eaters, we can kind of loosen the reins, but it can feel scary, right? It can kind of feel like we're in this fog and we don't know what's coming. I had that experience the other day driving 4 hours in fog to get home. That's a lot of extra work for your brain, by the way. So I wouldn't recommend it because then I was out of commission for a full day. But it's scary. We don't know what's coming. So intuitive eating, I don't want it to feel scary. I want you to focus on what can you start with to become more interoceptive and listen to your body. And how can you make sure that those things, those outer things, aren't inhibiting your attunement with what your body needs, right? So there's lots of different ways to start the process or get back into it. Those healthy habits are some easy ways. So there's drinking water, supplements, stress, sleep, activity, eating, I've got on that sheet, just eating vegetables and fruit. Don't even have to be fancy. Did I eat it? Yes. Having protein at each meal could be another thing that you think about. Protein helps stretch that energy out. So that's what I was talking with a client about today, who's coming back from disordered eating and really wanting to focus on consistent eating. We were talking about that blood sugar response, right? So if we're eating foods, she was having a bread, sunflower flax hemp bread with margarine and jam with coffee. Fine. So we took a look at just how that would break down in her body, right? So if you think about food that breaks down quick has something that we call a high glycemic index. So that means it's going to go up quick, the blood sugar response, and then it's going to fall quick, which can mean energy goes up, but then it falls back down. That's why when we're hungry or emotional, we want to eat something that gives us that quick response because it feels good. But to get that energy to be more consistent and look more like a rolling hill, then we want to make sure there's enough protein on board. And my approach with my clients in this group program expansion, but in my other practices as well, is keep it simple. So she liked that bread. She's eating bread, which, a lot of people that are coming back from disordered eating or an eating disorder, that wouldn't be in their wheelhouse. So that's great. So we checked out the bread. Yeah, it's got 8 grams of protein. or maybe I had 11 grams of protein. I can't remember. It was pretty good considering that it was just 2 slices of bread. Okay, so that protein is great. There's lots of fiber. How can we increase that protein a little bit to get that blood sugar to stretch out a bit further to keep the energy more consistent? So that's all we focused on. We focused on, oh, we could have a Greek yogurt with that. We could have, some protein powder in milk or water, whatever, on the side as a way to balance that out. But that's what I want you to think about. That's how I want you to think about your journey with intuitive eating is what little thing can I focus on right now? And that's why I think the Healthy Habits Tracker is a great way to just start to focus on one little thing. And if that's something that's off, not what you want to do right now, just start to focus how your body feels. You could just track that. Like when I wake up, how do I feel? Energy. So this morning, I probably would have said like 2 out of 10 when I woke up at 7:30. I didn't have any calls until later. So I went back to sleep to help support my body. I was awake. I could have stayed awake, but I kept myself calm enough to say like, okay, you're not wrong for needing more sleep and getting more sleep because I see the importance of sleep so much. But then I could also check in through the day, how my energy is, or, what did I eat? Some people, it's just self-awareness is starting to notice, when am I eating? Because we can be intuitive eaters, but if we're not fueling our body consistently, that's not supporting the body. And a lot of people, because we live in this go, 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 don't even know like what they ate yesterday or can't remember what they had or when they ate. So sometimes we start out with that PFC mechanical eating as a way to help you come into intuitive eating, because if we're not fueling ourselves consistently, then it's going to make everything harder. So sleep, consistent food intake. And if you want more information on that, let me know. I can share some of that with you. If you have access to Voxer for the one-on-one days, reach out that way. But my goal as an intuitive eating, emotional eating coach and registered dietitian is to help you guys see where you are and where we can build from there. So like I said at the beginning today, like the goal of these weekly sessions is to give you that space where you can ask your questions. So in the mastermind that I was in last night, that was the cool thing is, other people are asking questions. I'm listening because I'm still getting some information about how I can move my business forward in a way that works for me from their questions. And then I asked a question and the other individual that was on the call yesterday was like, wow, I didn't even know I had that question, but that gave me so much great information and helped me think about things different. So sometimes it's bringing a question and sometimes it might sound really simple and it might feel like, I don't know, I kind of think I should probably already know that. But it's how somebody reframes it differently. So I'll share an example. My question was, social media, that's where I do a lot of my business stuff. So I was working with this coach that's built her business up $2 million through social media in the last 5 years. So, she has a lot of great ideas and things. And I was saying to her, I've always struggled with engagement on social media. I love to post, I love to share, I love to educate and inspire people, but I don't really get the engagement piece, because I don't think about people on social media as being my ideal client. I think, well, they look happy enough. They look like they're probably feel good in their body and move on. But the way that she reframed it for me, it made me go, oh, because she thought like she 40 to 50 clients a week in my clinical days, or think about all the females that and especially the moms, because that's the focus I'm focused on. And how many of them would you say are happy with their body or have something that they don't feel good with in their body right now, I think was how she phrased it. So I had to think about it and I thought, oh, 9 out of 10. Like, even if I have the idea that they seem to be comfortable in their body, they're at a healthy weight, or I see them doing healthy behaviors, so why would they need extra support? The way that she actually quite sad when we think about it, have some body image or some body insecurities. And yeah, I would say it would be as high as 9 out of 10 females that I know, could probably quickly point out like, oh, I don't like this, or, you compliment someone and they say, oh, like, well, yeah, but what about this? Don't compliment people on their weight loss. Don't talk about weight loss. It's none of our business, right? We don't know if they're losing weight because they're unhealthy or they're sick or whatever. But it was just that reframe. So that's what I want you guys to get from these groups, even if you're not on the call. I know 3 of you had to miss a call today because I shifted the time. Again, I apologize. That was my error. I've now gone through and adjusted one schedule. I have to go and adjust another one. But when we come into this space, it's bring your questions, show up. Like, so when I showed up on my mastermind call last night, I wasn't really clear on what my question was, but I went anyways. And then I got so much information and so many ideas just from the way we started to talk about engaging socially, right? So, because social media is social. So all that to be said, come back, join us. I'm sorry I had to change it. I know a couple of you weren't available this week. Thanks, Deb, for hopping on anyways. I hope you found it useful. If you watch the replay and you have any questions, let me know. And I will set up regular Zoom things to go out. So like for the next month or two, what the schedule is. And then that's set in my schedule too. So we don't run into this overlap. Again, it's just because I'm managing lots of schedules. All right. So happy New Year. Have a wonderful week. And I will see you guys next Friday. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye, Deb.